Agatha Sinclair said I was an arrogant mistress. Her small face flushed with anger as she stood opposite me, pointing her finger at my nose and shouting. Yasmin, I was only abroad for a year, and you've already seduced Alaric away? Have you no shame? I crossed my arms and raised an eyebrow at her. Shame? Is that something you can eat? She trembled with rage, tears welling up in her eyes. Do you really think you've won? Don't you know that Alaric still loves me? You're just a replacement, and you don't even realize it. I hugged my arms tightly, but my face wore a disdainful smile. I don't know about love, but Alaric certainly sleeps with me every night, and not just once. I tilted my chin up, showing her the red marks on my neck. The ones from a few days ago have just faded, and these are fresh. If I hadn't been careful with protection, you'd be seeing your little niece or nephew by now. Tears rolled down Agatha's cheeks as she pointed at me, shaking. Yasmin, how can such a shameless woman like you be from the same father as me? I lowered my head and sneered. I couldn't understand it either, how we could have the same father. Perhaps it's because your mother was as shameless as I am, interfering in a marriage and stealing someone's husband, resulting in an illegitimate child like you? You. Agatha's face turned red, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, and she raised her hand to slap me across the face. I touched my cheek, raised an eyebrow at her, and immediately returned the favor with a slap to her face. She had been raised in luxury, while I had endured all sorts of hardships. Our strength was incomparable. Agatha's face immediately swelled and reddened, tears falling like broken strings of pearls. She stumbled back 2 steps in shock. Unexpectedly, the next second she covered her face and ran towards the door, crying out, Alaric, I'm so scared. My heart sank. I turned to look and saw a tall figure standing in the doorway, his body radiating coldness, his face as still as water. Alaric had returned. He took Agatha into his arms, patting her back soothingly. His movements were extremely gentle. Seeing Alaric's actions, I knew I had already lost. Of course, I was just a replacement when Agatha and Alaric had broken up in anger and she went abroad. I only benefited from looking similar to her. And I was the one who had taken advantage of the situation and offered myself to him. But I still felt a bit unwilling. I walked towards him with a smile, intending to take his briefcase. Alaric, you're back? Alaric looked at me silently, his expression unfriendly and very unfamiliar. Just last night we had made love late into the night, and this morning I had helped him tie his tie and seen him off. But now, as he embraced Agatha, I seemed like an intruder. Agatha cried pitifully in his arms. Alaric, I regret going abroad so much. If I hadn't left, I wouldn't have lost you. Alaric looked down at her, his eyes full of tenderness, stroking Agatha's hair. Only after Agatha had stopped sobbing did Alaric look up, his eyes calm and emotionless as he looked at me, but his words were directed at Agatha. Did Yasmin bully you? Agatha choked out, Yasmin just has a quick temper. I didn't mean anything by coming to find you today, it's understandable that she got angry. She sounded so pitiful. I lowered my eyes, saying nothing. Alaric's expression had already said everything. No matter how I tried to defend myself, it would be useless, just like how my mother had lost to her mother. Completely. Alaric narrowed his eyes at me, his brows furrowed tightly. Yasmin, on the first day you came, I taught you to know your place. I laughed self-mockingly and spread my hands towards Alaric. Mr. Farnaby, I know when to bow out. You two can continue this show, I'm leaving. Alaric paused for a moment, saying nothing. I lowered my head slightly, adjusted my expression, and forced a smile. Mr. Farnaby, please call me later. We can discuss the breakup then. Without waiting for his response, I strode out of the mansion, accepting my loss. That evening, Alaric Farnaby presented me with property deeds, bank cards, and share certificates, informing me that he was getting engaged to Agatha Sinclair and hoped we would have no further entanglements. I glanced down at the stack of documents before me, realizing they could ensure a life of comfort. I nodded and smiled, making sure my expression mirrored Agatha's with about 90% accuracy. Very well, Mr. Farnaby. Thank you for your care these past few years. Alaric raised an eyebrow, his eyes betraying a hint of surprise. He seemed unprepared for my composure, no tears, no pleas, just calm acceptance. I gathered his parting gifts and smiled even more genuinely. Thank you for these presents, Mr. Farnaby. Please rest assured, I'll disappear from your sight completely and won't cling to the past. Alaric's brow furrowed slowly. Yasmin, are you happy about our breakup? I lowered my head slightly, correcting him with a smile. Not at all, Mr. Farnaby. I'm happy about receiving these gifts. Alaric's eyes filled with dark anger. After a few seconds, he stood up and left. I couldn't understand what he was angry about. Wasn't my tact exactly what he had hoped to see? Men. The day Alaric Farnaby left, I transformed from a stand-in to a wealthy woman. I shed my plain dress, removed my light makeup, and tossed out all the innocent clothes in my wardrobe. Those were all bought by Alaric, reflecting Agatha Sinclair's style, not mine. I slipped into a bright red mini dress, went out to dye my hair chestnut brown, and styled it into vintage waves. I dabbed a deep crimson on my lips. This is the real me, Yasmin Caldwell. Now, I just want to live well, better than Agatha. I want my mom to live well, better than Agatha's mom. When I first approached Alaric, I was clear about what I wanted. It wasn't Alaric himself. I wanted his substantial breakup fee. As for the occasional flutter of my heart in between, I'll just chalk it up to a brief bout of flu. I stepped out of my sports car, about to head home, when a figure suddenly darted in front of me. It was Agatha. She glared at me coldly. How much did you get from Alaric as a breakup fee? I raised an eyebrow, more than you could imagine. After all, I provided excellent service, and the patron was very satisfied. Agatha sneered with disdain. What good is your service when you had to watch Alaric dote on me while you cried in the corner? I couldn't help but laugh. Agatha, do you really think I'm as hung up on Alaric as you are? I leaned in close to Agatha and said slowly, from start to finish, I never loved him. I only loved his money. You got the man, I got the money. We both won, don't you think? I knew I was blatantly lying, but I wouldn't show weakness in front of her. Agatha fell oddly silent. She kept staring behind me. I turned around to find Alaric standing there. I'd forgotten Agatha's provocations were always meant for Alaric to see. Once bitten, twice shy, yet here I was again. Agatha ran to Alaric, her small steps appearing delicate. Alaric, why did you follow me? I just wanted to make peace with Yasmin. Why don't you trust me? Alaric held her in his arms, his movements gentle, but his eyes still fixed on me. Well played, Yasmin. I bit my lip and forced a smile. Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Farnaby. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? He scoffed. No, thanks. It's sickening. He walked away with Agatha in his arms, not looking back. I stared at his retreating figure, lost in thought for a moment, before silently turning to go home. That night, I moved my mum from her old, run-down flat to live in the villa with me. With my mum settled in, half of my lifelong wish fulfilled, I retired to my room for a peaceful night's sleep. The next morning, I walked into the study, my fingertips brushing over the desk as I stood lost in thought. For many nights, Alaric Farnaby had worked here, while I made him tea and kept him company. I was the perfect mistress, doing everything Agatha Sinclair would do, and more. Over these years, I had completely absorbed his investment mindset and business acumen. I was his best pupil. Alaric was generous. The settlement he gave me was enough for me to start investing. He had taken me to numerous social events, leaving me with a wealth of connections. I had played Agatha's substitute for a year, waiting for this very day. The day I would begin my climb to the top. Ever since my mother and I left the Sinclair family, I knew being a wife was less secure than being a boss. At least a boss couldn't be made redundant, while a wife could be discarded at any time. From the moment I approached Alaric, I wanted more than just being his mistress. I wanted to be Alaric Farnaby. In the days that followed, I was busy day and night, barely home, sometimes forced to attend social gatherings. Everyone was civilized enough. Apart from suggestive comments and exchanging numbers, there weren't any extreme behaviors. Except for this one time, when I encountered an old lecher who kept plying me with drinks and dragged me to another private room, getting handsy. Feeling weak all over, I strongly suspected the drink had been spiked. I bit my lip to stay alert and frantically dialed for help. Minutes later, the club owner arrived with security, pulling the old lecher away and helping me out of the room. Half an hour later, Alaric appeared before me, radiating cold fury, glaring at my exposed pale skin. In the most dangerous moment, his number was the only one I could remember. When I woke up again, I was lying in a hotel room. I heard Alaric's voice coming from the bathroom. "Go to sleep, Agatha. I'll be back after I've dealt with this." His voice was gentler than I'd ever heard it. It still stung a bit. I sighed, waiting for him to finish his call and approach me. He tossed me a long dress, pure white, covering from head to toe. "Yasmin, look at yourself." He looked down at me, at my tight red dress that had ridden up to my thighs. "You've degraded yourself." My emerging smile slowly froze. He tilted his chin up. "You love money that much? What I gave you wasn't enough, so you had to go out and entertain for more?" I lowered my eyes, got up to put on my shoes, and stood before him with a forced smile that didn't reach my eyes. Mr. Farnaby is right. I am degraded. How else could I willingly be someone's substitute? "What did you say?" A flash of anger crossed Alaric's eyes. I raised my head, for the first time not greeting him with a smile. "Mr. Farnaby, as degraded as I am, you slept with me for a year. As degraded as I am, I didn't cheat with an ex. As degraded as I am, I'm a legitimate daughter, not trying to steal someone else's father." Alaric's anger intensified. I bit my lip and laughed coldly. "Mr. Farnaby has never been poor, so you probably don't know that the poor are always afraid of not having enough money. If you really care about me, why don't you go ask your beloved why she made me go from being a lady to a pauper, why she stole my man and then told me that the unloved one is the third wheel?" Alaric's expression softened for a moment. Perhaps he had never seen me cry before, and was shocked for a moment. I wiped away my tears, also shocked for a moment. I pushed him away and stumbled out, hailed a cab home, tears flowing uncontrollably on the way. Once upon a time, I was a cherished little princess too. Later, I was reduced to being a substitute for an illegitimate daughter, reduced to being an object for others to molest at will. Why? I refused to accept this. After that day, Alaric Farnaby never contacted me again. But the investments we had discussed earlier went exceptionally smoothly, and several good companies even approached me proactively. When I went out for business engagements, no one tried to take advantage of me anymore, and everyone was very polite. The only possibility was that Alaric had put in a good word for me. I gladly accepted all these favors. As things suddenly started going smoothly, I had some breathing room, so I enrolled in an MBA course to learn and expand my network at the same time. Gradually, I gained a foothold in the circle, and I started receiving invitations to some cocktail parties in the circle. Just like this time, a big shot was having a birthday, and I was invited because his son was my MBA classmate. When I arrived, I found that my father was also on the guest list. Everyone knew he was successful in both fame and fortune, but no one knew that he had started from scratch with my grandfather's help. Nor did they know that after he had swindled all the money my grandfather had left for my mother, he had brought his mistress and illegitimate daughter home, kicking us out. He didn't even acknowledge me, just because my mother had me take her surname after the divorce, no longer bearing the Sinclair name. Since then, my mother and I had been through all kinds of hardships. Now, standing not far from him, watching him and Alaric Farnaby doting on Agatha on either side, I suddenly felt like laughing. I turned away, preparing to go network elsewhere. Unfortunately, just as I lifted my foot, Agatha spotted me. She called out sweetly, "Sister Yasmin." I couldn't even pretend not to hear as she ran up and linked her arm with mine. "Why don't you greet Dad when you see him? Family shouldn't hold grudges overnight. Are you still angry?" Then, without giving me a chance to respond, she dragged me in front of my father. My father snorted heavily, his eyes full of disgust. He glared at me. "You come here dressed like this, are you trying to seduce Alaric again?" I smiled coyly, glancing at Alaric. "What do you think?" Alaric examined my tight-fitting cocktail dress, his eyes dark and unreadable. My father berated me again. "Where did you learn these vixen tricks? How did your mother raise you?" I raised an eyebrow. "I learned from your current wife. After all, That's how she managed to drive me out. I had to learn well. Agatha's face turned red. Yasmin, how can you insult your elders like that? Besides, my mom and dad got together because of love. I couldn't help but laugh. Lowering my head, I said, got together? More like an affair. Yasmin! Alaric's warning and the sound of a loud slap rang out simultaneously. My father had slapped me hard across the face. It hit my ear, making it ring. Everyone around turned to look. All faces showed surprise, except for a tall man directly opposite me, who was holding a wine glass with great interest. His gaze provoked me. I didn't like letting anyone see me in a pathetic state. All my efforts were to climb to a high place, to forget the humiliation of being abandoned by my father, to pick up the dignity I had lost. But no matter how hard I tried, I was still being hit, still being treated like a clown. Zane Sinclair, who do you think you are to hit me? I rubbed my ear and shoved my father hard. Because I'm your father. He was furious and raised his hand again. But before he could bring it down, Alaric grabbed his wrist. Alaric gave my father an expressionless look. My father slowly lowered his hand. I covered my still ringing ear, amused again. Alaric grabbed my hand and strode towards the bathroom, pulling me along. I was bewildered as he dragged me along. As we passed the tall man with the amused smile, I even heard him greet me, "Hi." I couldn't bother to respond. When we reached the bathroom door, Alaric finally let go of me and touched my face. "Does it hurt?" A wave of grievance washed over me. I closed my eyes briefly, forcing back the tears. Alaric stared at my upturned eyeliner, his gaze deepening. He said in a low voice, "You insulted Agatha's mother first, that wasn't right. Go back and apologize to Agatha later, I'll drive you home." I suddenly opened my eyes. I thought I must have misheard. "Alaric Farnaby, have you lost your mind?" I was furious. I shook off his hand. "What right do you have to make me apologize? Who are you to me?" "Just a former sugar daddy, you're really taking yourself too seriously." Alaric narrowed his eyes. "Yasmin, what did you say?" "I said you're just my former sugar daddy, we've already settled our accounts, what right do you have to make me apologize? What do you understand to play peacemaker?" I had imagined before that maybe Alaric had a bit of feeling for me too. Now I felt I was just being pathetic. Alaric gripped my wrist so tightly it made me break out in a cold sweat. His face was calm, his eyes deep, as he looked at me and asked, "Yasmin, is a sugar daddy the only one who can make you behave?" I stubbornly remained silent. He leaned in closer, bending down to look at me, our noses almost touching. "Name your price." I thought I must have misheard. "Say that again?" Alaric said slowly, "Name your price." "I'll be your sugar daddy again." I truly laughed at the absurdity. "You want to cheat?" I hoped he would say yes, yet I also hoped he wouldn't. Alaric looked at my exposed collarbone, his Adam's apple bobbing, his eyes igniting with an unfamiliar flame, one I had never seen even during our most intimate moments. "Yasmin, I don't like your current style and attitude," he said hoarsely. Alaric's eyes darkened further as he gripped my shoulders, about to say something. But just as he opened his mouth, he was interrupted by a laugh from behind. "Alaric, your little girlfriend is looking for you." The voice was cool, tinged with mockery. Alaric and I both looked over to see the tall man who had been smirking earlier. He winked at me. I noticed he looked similar to Alaric, both with sharp features and handsome faces. He extended his hand to me. "Hello, Winston Farnaby." I knew Winston Farnaby. Uncle to Alaric Farnaby, the late-born son of the Farnaby family, Winston was renowned for his exceptional abilities. Rumor had it that Alaric's parents were wary of him, anticipating a fierce battle for inheritance in the future. Alaric was often compared to Winston, given their mere 5-year age gap and their shared brilliance. Alaric eyed Winston cautiously, subtly shielding me behind him. Winston chuckled. "Do you want this young lady to receive another slap from her father?" Alaric hesitated momentarily before turning to whisper to me, "Go home quickly. Wait for my call." After a pause, he raised his voice, "Stay away from strangers." With that, he hurried towards the main hall. I caught a glimpse of Agatha Sinclair, teary-eyed, rushing into his arms and sobbing something to him. Winston leaned against the wall, eyeing me with an amused expression. I suppressed my anger and looked at him. What are you staring at? Waiting to see when you'll cry, he glanced at his wristwatch. How much longer can you hold it in? I immediately held back my tears. Perhaps you should use that time to see a neurologist. Your stroke might be imminent. Winston chuckled softly. He extended his hand towards me. Let's be friends. I shook my head and turned to leave. As I reached the corner, I glanced back inadvertently. Winston was still standing there, his eyes fixed on me with an unmistakable glint of excitement. After the party, my life took a turn for the worse. I knew something was amiss. Upon discreet inquiry, I discovered it was my father's doing. Those who had shown respect to Alaric Farnaby, when forced to choose between my former lover and my father, their potential father-in-law, naturally chose my father. I was in a state of distress, facing setbacks at every turn, becoming the subject of much ridicule. Until one day, I was invited to a private gathering, with the promise of an introduction to an influential person. At that point, I had no other options and decided to attend. As soon as I entered the private room, I saw a man seated at the head of the table. He had sharp features and a handsome face, bearing some resemblance to Alaric Farnaby. However, unlike Alaric, this man was more prone to smiling, with twinkling eyes that were studying me intently. He nodded at me. We meet again. I bit my lip hard, forcing myself to smile as I sat opposite him. Mr. Farnaby. Call me Winston. He raised his glass to me. Let's be friends. I took a deep breath and nodded. All right, Winston. As the dinner party came to an end, Winston had drunk quite a lot. When it was time to leave, he asked me to support him. Winston chuckled softly near my ear. How long can you hold out this time? I took a deep breath and replied, as long as you want me to, sir. Winston glanced at his wristwatch and said, half an hour, then. He opened the car door, and I got into his vehicle. I was almost ready to give up at this point. Winston sat in the back with me, resting his chin on his hand, looking at me through half-closed eyes with a faint smile playing on his lips. I avoided his gaze, letting him take me wherever he pleased. After 10 minutes, he suddenly spoke. 20 more minutes to go. I glanced at him, but he was looking out the window. Another 10 minutes passed, and he spoke again. 10 more minutes. Outside, the night was thick, and dim streetlights cast shadows of dense woodland. It was only then that I realized we were on the motorway, already in the outskirts of the city. A chill ran down my spine as scenes from various horror films flashed through my mind. Looking at the man beside me, who had been smiling quietly most of the journey, made it even more terrifying. Where are you taking me? I asked, shrinking back. He checked his watch again. Just a few more minutes. Time began to slow down, each second feeling like torture. I pleaded, I'll do anything, please don't hurt me. I still have unfulfilled wishes. Winston burst out laughing and signaled the driver to stop. He got out of the car first and beckoned to me. I didn't want to leave the car, but the driver urged me. Mr. Farnaby won't do anything to you. Do you think he'd risk his fortune on you? Half believing, half doubting, but mainly because I had no choice, I got out of the car. Winston called me to his side and pointed at a dark expanse of water in front of us. You can let it out now. Looking around, I realized we had somehow arrived near the Farnaby residence, in an old, affluent neighborhood. I felt relieved, but then the fear and distress that followed the shock hit me. I couldn't hold back anymore and burst into tears with a loud wah. Tears are strange things. Either you stop them the moment they start to flow, or once the floodgates open. It's like a deluge, allowing you to cry out all the grievances you've ever experienced, multiplied. I sat on the ground, wailing in an unsightly manner, cursing and swearing. I felt wronged. Why? For what reason? What had I done wrong? Why didn't my father want me? Why did Alaric leave me? Why couldn't I hold on to anything? Winston stood quietly beside me, waiting until I had no more tears left. Only then did he help me up and wipe my tears and nose with a tissue. I hiccuped, but the pent-up emotions in my heart had vanished, leaving me with a sense of relief I'd never felt before. I looked at him quizzically and asked, why? Winston's lips curled into a slight smile. I wanted to see how long you could hold out. I thought he was mad, but I didn't dare say it. I could only change the subject. This place is quite peaceful. Winston looked at the lake surface. After a while, he nodded. It's a good place to cry. I somehow ended up getting involved with Winston Farnaby. Even more bizarrely, rumors started circulating that he was my new sugar daddy. The upside of these rumors was that my career began to flourish again, and I seized this rare period of stability to accelerate my growth. I believed that one day, I would endure until no one could hold me back. And I wouldn't need to rely on any man's name to stand alone at the top, smiling. But rumors also have their downsides. The downside was that Alaric Farnaby took them seriously. He knocked on my door in the middle of the night, completely drunk, demanding, "Are you and Winston together now?" I frowned but still welcomed him in, made him some Scotch broth, covered him with a blanket, and let him rest. This was how I used to take care of him. As I approached him with the soup, he asked me to lean closer. I bent down, and Alaric leaned towards me, mumbling, "What spell have you cast on me? Why can't I forget you?" I felt an inexplicable sadness but still reminded him, "You have Agatha now." It was as if he'd been slapped awake. He withdrew his hand that was reaching for my chest, closed his eyes, and didn't speak again until dawn. It wasn't until 7 in the morning that Alaric got up to leave. While washing up, he asked me, "Is it true about you and Winston?" I leaned against the bathroom door, smiling, my eyes greedily lingering on him, but I told him nothing. Why should I, as a substitute, report my private life to him after our breakup while he dotes on Agatha? Alaric left without getting an answer, his face cold. As he was leaving, he glanced at me and said, "My offer from that day still stands whenever you want to consider it." Winston Farnaby has been meeting with me frequently lately, even having me accompany him during office hours and business engagements. Even my father called me, which I didn't answer. He then had the audacity to call my mother's mobile. He hasn't actively contacted us, mother and daughter, for over a decade. I took the phone and blocked his number, feeling an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. Winston Farnaby hasn't so much as touched me until now. He seems to have something wrong with his head. Sometimes I suspect he's grooming me to be his heir. In his office, I simply accompany him while he works. It's like studying with a teacher, and he occasionally tests me. When I accompany him to social events, he introduces me to others as his little apprentice. He teaches me how to negotiate and strategize. Thanks to Winston's guidance, I'm growing rapidly, far surpassing what I secretly learned from Alaric Farnaby. My relationship with him has even caught the attention of old Mr. Farnaby. The old man has demanded to meet me, this vixen who seduced his nephew and now his son. He hasn't even met Agatha Sinclair yet. Given the commotion, I guess that perhaps Winston truly had feelings for me, maybe even hinting at it in front of old Mr. Farnaby? But in the next moment, Winston's words shattered my speculation. He kept his head down, reviewing documents, and said to the assistant sent by old Mr. Farnaby, "No need to meet." Sitting beside him, I felt somewhat embarrassed, but could only maintain a forced smile. The assistant glanced at me, his eyes filled with a hint of contempt. After the assistant left, Winston continued reviewing documents. I felt a fire of anger burning inside me, though I didn't know why. I knew I was being ungrateful. Over these past few years, he was the first person who didn't covet anything from me, didn't despise me, and gave me respect. Winston finished reviewing the documents, picked up his cup to drink coffee, and noticing my expression, paused for a moment. The corner of his lips curved into an attractive smile. "Are you angry?" I forced a fake smile, "No." Winston stood up and walked over, making his first somewhat intimate gesture towards me. He patted the top of my head, his cool voice tinged with amusement. "I meant you don't need to meet him, not that he doesn't need to meet you." The detachment in his tone made it hard to tell that the him he referred to was his own father. I was somewhat surprised and looked up at him. For the first time, I noticed that his eyes were very deep, making it impossible to discern his true feelings. After refusing Mr. Farnaby's assistant, Mrs. Farnaby also sent someone to fetch me, ordering me to see her. Winston Farnaby let out a cold laugh and replied with the same answer, "No need." I found it strange but didn't dare to ask more. A few days later, Alaric Farnaby gave me the answer. He stopped me at the doorstep with a cold face. "Yasmin, why did you choose Winston?" I shrugged. "Why did you choose Agatha?" After a moment, he sneered, "You kept looking down on Agatha for being illegitimate, yet you chose an illegitimate son yourself?" He continued, "Because of you, Winston has angered both Mr. and Mrs. Farnaby. Mr. Farnaby has declared that illegitimate children have no right to inherit the Farnaby group." I froze. Alaric grabbed my shoulders. "Yasmin, without his inheritance rights, he can't give you anything." Suddenly feeling furious, I struggled but couldn't break free. I looked up and glared at him. "And what can you give me? The status of a mistress? To bear another illegitimate child in the future? Is this some kind of Farnaby family tradition?" He stared at me, stunned. After a long while, he said softly, "I regret it, isn't that enough?" I still didn't take it to heart and waved him away. "Mr. Farnaby, you'd better get back to work. The Farnaby Group is a massive business, enough to keep you busy for a while." Alaric's voice turned cold, with a barely noticeable tremor. "Yasmin, this is your last chance. I can break up with Agatha." "Alaric," I raised my head, interrupting him. "Right after our breakup, I dreamed of him saying this every night. But why didn't he say it earlier? Why did he have to say it after I met Winston?" I thought I could never forget Alaric. But then Winston appeared. Only by his side did I realize how addictive it feels to be respected and valued. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to find Winston now." "You should leave." Pain flashed through Alaric's eyes. "I'm getting engaged. If you come back, I can change partners." He reached out to grab me again, but I dodged. "Mr. Farnaby doesn't like women like me. If you get engaged to me, aren't you afraid he'll cancel your inheritance rights too?" Alaric's hand froze. I stood there, smiling at him. "Forget it. Such an enormous fortune, it would be a shame to give it up." "I think Agatha suits you well." Alaric had always been decisive. This was the only time I'd ever seen him hesitate. I rushed to call Winston. After dialing his number, it took a long time before he picked up, but he didn't speak. I grew more anxious. "Where are you?" "I'll come find you." There was a moment of silence on the other end, then he said softly, "Look towards the west lane." Puzzled, I followed his instructions and looked west. A tall figure was leaning against a tree by the lane, smiling at me with crinkled eyes. I was startled and quickly walked towards him, carefully examining him. "When did you get here? Why didn't you say anything?" I felt uneasy, wondering how much he had seen of my earlier tussle with Alaric. Winston's smile deepened. "Just arrived. I suddenly felt like having a drink today, so I came to find you." I breathed a sigh of relief, but then tensed up again. "Are you all right?" "I just heard." "You heard that I'm an illegitimate child, didn't you?" Winston put his arm around my shoulders, leading me towards his car. His frankness left me speechless, and I could only fidget with my fingers. He ushered me into the car and drove towards the outskirts of the city. I realized the route seemed familiar, a bit like the road to the Farnaby residence. Anxiously, I asked him, "Are you taking me there to argue with them?" Winston paused for a moment, then burst into laughter. He pulled the car over to the side of the road and, without warning, drew me close, planting a loud kiss on my forehead. "Have you lost your mind?" He gestured for me to get out of the car. As I stepped out, I realized we were at the lakeside where he had once forced me to cry. Confused, I said, "I don't feel like crying today." Winston didn't look at me. He gazed silently at the lake. "When I was little and felt I couldn't go on, I'd run here to cry my heart out. No one would laugh at me here, no one would look down on me, and no one would tell on me." It was the first time I'd seen his eyes without a trace of humor, only a hint of melancholy beyond his years. He continued to stare at the water. "My mother fought with old Mrs. Farnaby for years, never securing the position of the official wife. She went mad and ended up in a mental hospital. From the age of 8, I had to fend for myself in the Farnaby household." My heart sank, as if pricked by a needle. Not knowing how to comfort him, I silently took his cold hand, trying to transfer my warmth to him. He gripped my hand in return. "Everyone in the Farnaby family has lovers and illegitimate children. Alaric has 2 illegitimate sisters as well." This was news to me. Hearing the sadness in his voice, I moved closer to him, trying to offer comfort. "That's not fair. Winston hugged me. When I was younger, I couldn't understand. I always thought old Mrs. Farnaby had ruined my mother's life, that I should hate her. But as I grew older, I realized that wasn't the case. He turned to look at the Farnaby residence in the distance. My hatred should be directed elsewhere. I nodded, understanding completely. This was also why I had never actively provoked Agatha. I knew who I should truly resent. Winston sat me down on the grass, his arm around me. So, you see, I've always had a dream. I want to ensure the Farnaby family can no longer create more mad women, more villainesses. Something about this didn't sit right with me. What are you planning to do? I grew nervous. Winston smiled, looking down into my eyes, but I've been walking this path alone until I saw you at that cocktail party. When I saw you holding back tears, trying to be strong, it suddenly reminded me of my childhood. I thought I'd finally found someone who could walk this path with me. I looked into his eyes. Those almond-shaped eyes were no longer filled with mirth, the corners were tinged with red, making him look vulnerable. Alaric had accused me of bewitching him, but at this moment, I felt that Winston was the one truly capable of casting spells. Looking into those eyes, everything he said seemed right. He leaned towards me, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was gentle yet determined, leaving me breathless. After a long moment, he sighed against my ear. Yasmin, I've been alone for far too long. Winston Farnaby and I officially became a couple. People said I'd picked up a Farnaby cast-off, that I'd lost my mind, but I was truly happy. It turns out that a compatible partner can heal all wounds. A few months later, Alaric Farnaby got engaged and officially became the Farnaby heir. Winston and I attended the engagement party together. As a result, Winston and I were isolated in a corner, treated like we were contagious. Everyone who passed by us quickened their pace, afraid to even greet us. Worried that Winston might feel dejected, I tugged at his arm, suggesting we leave. But Winston just smiled, patting the back of my hand. I need to watch you get over him completely. I couldn't help but laugh at his words. When Alaric and Agatha Sinclair were making their rounds with drinks, they turned and saw Winston and me. Alaric's glass fell to the ground, shattering with a crisp sound. I saw him take a step towards me, but Agatha subtly pulled him back without drawing attention. I looked up at Winston. Can we go now? Winston grinned, leaning down to give me a deep kiss, full of possessive desire. Then he put his arm around my shoulders, waved at Alaric, and led me out. It felt wonderful to be cherished by someone. After the engagement party, Alaric Farnaby officially took over all the wealth and power of the Farnaby Group. This battle for family assets ended with Winston Farnaby's bitter defeat. But after losing the Farnaby business, Winston became even busier. It wasn't until the second night he took me to the lakeside that I learned he had another company outside the family. And now he had the ability to swallow up the Farnaby Group. Having been in the Farnaby Group for years, Winston knew all the weaknesses of their businesses. This new company of his was the Farnaby Group's nemesis. Meanwhile, with his help, my company was also growing rapidly. He said that for a young wolf, teaching her to hunt and helping her claim a territory was far more beneficial than simply feeding her meat. I couldn't agree more. What Winston gave me was the best gift and promise I could imagine in this world. 2 years have passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, we hadn't seen the Farnaby family. Until today, when Vera Farnaby passed away. Winston and I returned to pay our respects. Alaric Farnaby was there too. He looked haggard and gave me a long, deep look. Waldo Farnaby's illegitimate son, raised abroad, had returned to England. Rumor had it that he was quite favored by Waldo. Waldo had forcibly allocated a portion of the Farnaby Group's assets to him. Alaric was under immense pressure. It seemed this pressure had transferred to Agatha. For the first time, I saw Agatha looking withered, her sweetness gone. She walked towards me, staring intently. What spell have you cast on Alaric? I was bewildered. Have you gone mad? She gritted her teeth, unable to hide her exhaustion. For 2 years, Alaric has been making me wear red dresses, high heels, and get perms. He wants me to imitate everything about you. Even in bed, he calls out your name. Only then did I notice that Agatha's makeup, hairstyle, and clothes were all copied from me, as if transplanted. I found it absurd and laughable, yet I couldn't bring myself to laugh. The tables had turned, and now Agatha had become my stand-in. I should have felt triumphant, but I only felt weary. I looked up at Winston. Let's go, I'm tired. Winston took one last look at Vera Farnaby's portrait, then took my hand. Let's go. Not long after, some illegal business practices of the Farnaby Group were exposed, leading to an investigation. Only Alaric Farnaby managed to escape unscathed from the entire family. Overnight, the empire crumbled. The Farnaby Group fell from grace, and there was no possibility of any more illegitimate children emerging. This prestigious family no longer existed in the world. In an instant, Alaric Farnaby lost everything, going from being the center of attention to someone everyone avoided. I had someone deliver a card to him, returning the breakup fee he had once given me, down to the last penny. He was no longer the same, and neither was I. Alaric Farnaby sent the card back, with a message of thanks. As for Agatha Sinclair, who had once been inseparable from Alaric Farnaby, she was the first to divorce him after the Farnaby Group's downfall. But despite her swift action, she couldn't save the Sinclair Group. As a company that had relied on the Farnaby Group for survival, my father's lifelong pride and joy declared bankruptcy just 2 weeks after the Farnaby Group's collapse. The night my father's company went bankrupt, the evening was beautiful. Winston Farnaby and I stood by the window, raising our glasses to the moonlight. He pointed dramatically out the window, his finger almost reaching for the sky. The moon is so bright. In the moonlight, the ring on his hand reflected a soft silver glow. I laughed at his theatrics, mimicking his exaggeration by stretching out my ring finger towards the window. Indeed, it's making my ring shine so brightly. He reached for my hand, our fingers intertwining, the 2 wedding rings nestling quietly together. After a long moment, he smiled and said, "Mrs. Farnaby, thank you for ensuring I'm no longer alone." I leaned into his embrace, whispering softly in reply, "Thank you too. Thank you for allowing me to find my own strength, so that I'm no longer afraid of being abandoned by anyone, including you." The moonlight was beautiful, the embrace was warm, and my heart was at peace. This was enough.